Good evening, everyone. System Chalk here with the second episode of our first Book of Hours playthrough through YouTube. So, just a reminder, this is a copy of the game that I was given from Weather Factory for promotional purposes. Sadly, there wasn't a Kickstarter, so I wasn't able to buy it, and we are going to need to get that disclosure out of the way, at least for a while when, you know, everybody's kind of... While the frenzy's up, I think it's good to say this sort of stuff. My apologies for those of you who watch this video in the future when this sort of stuff doesn't matter, but... You know, again, these guidelines exist to help us all. So we have survived the storm. We have exhausted an element of our soul to be able to find shelter and go in. I think that's a decent trade-off. And so we have a few options available to us. We can try to see if we can get the assistants to help out with the miscloaked bridge. We could try to find something to do with our memories, fear and hindsight. Or we could maybe try and investigate all of these different locations. So I think one of the first things we might want to do would be get a measure of where we are. So we've got Mr. and Mrs. Kill. Mrs. Kill, the midwife, is tall and gloomy. Mr. Kill, the undertaker, is slight and wry. For 10 years she has drawn villagers into the world, and he has shaped cradles for their departure. But she can also whittle, and he can paint. Also paint. So this will accept Winter and Grail. So the rectory, locked. Reverend Timothy is a hospitable soul, but Terence, his housekeeper, guards her employer fiercely. She doesn't want his innocent theological enthusiasms getting him in trouble with the new king's men. So this is, I believe, the third reference to the new king in the Restoration, specifically how it affects the opinion of the people of Brandkrug. So you need an introduction or a mutual acquaintance marked with lantern, knock, or sky, perhaps someone who shares his interests in theology or poetry. We have the Sweet Bones. After the Restoration of 1930, the new king's agents came looking for his enemies in these parts, and they weren't gentle about it. Since those days, the locals are suspicious of foreigners. No one in the Sweet Bones will talk with me. We've got Denzil the Smith. Denzil Smith has more work than he needs, and he rarely opens his door to strangers. You need an introduction or a mutual acquaintance marked with Edge, Forge, or Heart, someone in a similar trade, or someone who can appeal to his secret passion for saffron cake. Finally, the post office. The postmistress may have something for me once I know what to ask for. So in each of these cases, we can take a look at the elements that we need. Most of them have already sort of described but what we need, but in this case here for the post office, we need to give it something readable and a journal, but it can't be soaked. Oh, that's interesting. I'm sorry to do bugs. I just want to make a note for that for an email afterwards, I think. Interesting. Okay. That's not something major that we need to deal with. But in this case here, so we've got an idea in terms of what we could do with the post office. The other place that seemed likely was the Sweet Bones. So for the Sweet Bones, we can use assistance, pence, metal, core, or shaft. So in this case here, you know, it's just as easy for me to wait for my core to become available. In this case, probably trying to recover the drowned book seems like a good idea. So, the front room. In this case, the Kills put the kettle on when they see you coming down the street. So in this case, we've got an element of the soul, Grail, or Winter. It can't be fatigued or have a malady. And so in this case, we have really only one option available to us, the Arab. So, Mrs. Kill's mood always improves when I drop by. If I don't choose a topic, Mrs. Kill will offer help as a friend. Now, one question might be, would Mrs. Kill be able to help us out? Now, with the bridge, we don't necessarily know that based on what we see from this encounter, right? Mrs. Kill stands ready to help. You always cheer me up, she says morosely. I happen to know that she won't be able to help us with this, and more importantly, if we take a look at topics, ask Mrs. Kill about something specific, or leave this empty to wait until she's free and can lend her assistance. So in this case, if we give her something that's soaked, we can get some help cleaning it up. drying it out. Dry out a book. Mrs. Kill, gloomy as always, kind as ever, lights the kitchen fire and helps me dry the book, while Mr. Kill saws away in the next room. Birth always leaves marks, she opines, as she carefully tucks fragments of muslin between the damp pages. So this seems like a good use for it, because we've got a thread. We're not able to work with the bridge, but we are going to be able to unlock the post office with this, and that might, that might give us a few options down the road. So the silken book. The binding is unusual and half familiar. Some kind of silk? It survived its soaking remarkably well. So in this case, we talked about the sky element aspect, we talked about the mystery grail thing, uncatalogued. There's nothing as safe as ignorance or as dangerous. Nero Wolfe. Readable and a journal. So I do like the description of the journal. I began before this book, but it'll end when I do. All right. So in this case here, we've got the answer in terms of the journal. Now, noting here, our only option at this point, we've got an element of the soul, but we can't put this in the front room. It doesn't seem like the heart's going to be able to do anything with the sweet bones. So at this point, I think our best bet is to work with the post office. The postmistress may have something for me once I know what to ask for. Something for me? The postmistress regards me with the chilly gaze of a goddess image in an ancient hill shrine. The librarian, says she. Yes, I have something for you. Wait here, please. The postmistress returns with an envelope addressed to the librarian, Hush House, Brankrug Isle, postmarked in Wales a week ago. So that has a letter to the librarian. A letter to me from St. Ronwin's Trust. The Trust's connection with Hush House is probably benevolent, but persistently obscure. So this is also readable, and it is correspondence. I can reply to this from a writing desk. And a 10-shilling note, half a pound, but not half a note. A recent innovation. And this is worth 120 pence. The eccentric currency of a fallen empire. 1 penny is 4 farthings, 12 pence are 1 shilling, and so on. Okay, so we have a few options available to us now. Again, we're not able to unlock the rectory or the smithy because we don't have an introduction. But recall that the sweet bones gave us the option of using pence to enter in. Now, we could wait till the next day to recover our core, but seeing as we've got a 10-shilling note, we might as well see what we can do with the sweet bones. So, a wary welcome at the inn. In the time of the Heptarchy, a ring-giver was accounted generous. In this bright and civilized century, a beer buyer enjoys the same regard. This is, incidentally, this should not be thought of as the best or the only way to play. What I'm doing here is I'm just following the logic of this particular playthrough. I bought a round for everyone, and another, and one more for luck, and thus I was accounted not so bad for a foreigner. I'll find a warmer welcome here next time. Alright, welcome to the currency system of Book of Hours. So we have a crown, 5 shillings, 1/4 of a pound, 60 pence. A half crown, 2.5 shillings, obviously, 30. A shilling, 12 pence, or, if you prefer, 1/20th of a pound. And 6 pence, the silver coin of least value, but silver nonetheless. 6 pence. Alright, so there are things we can do at the Sweet Bones now. The Sweet Bones has been the public house in Brankrug since Cromwell's time. Its history is notable, its beer is not. Guests looking for discreet employment or for discreet assistance congregate in the snug. So I can put something of myself inside of it, or I could put mine, something soaked, so I would have been able to dry out the journal off of that, or I could put pence inside. So what happens if I put 6 pence in? A fair arrangement? 1 shilling, 12 pence will hire a casual labourer's services. So 6 pence isn't enough, but we can add the shilling here. Assistance from a miner. In spring, the local miners often travel to the Feast of Lights below. If one breaks his journey at the Sweet Bones, a shilling will buy his labour for a day. Miners offer scale, forge, and a little moon. Well, is that helpful? Remember that the Mistcloak Bridge needed forge. So, I think that is worth it. Miners' assistants. Thus they were more or less thus they more or less ruled themselves, with the help of their wild Celtic temperament, made wilder by the harshness of their lives and the truly ghastly conditions under which they worked. With all this, it is not to be wondered that the tinners acquired the reputation of being scarcely human, but it must be remembered that among them at all times were those whose characters could stand comparison with the best of men. L. Russell Muirhead. So, the miners' assistants, we kind of already know what we're getting from them from the description here. They're assistants. They do have an introduction, so I could use them to introduce myself to Denzel. They've got 2 scale, 1 moon, and forge. So my options are I could go to Cucurbit Bridge and unlock that, or I could try and unlock the smithy. Now, it would seem to me that it's probably better for me to pursue the bridge here, so... every so often, someone builds a bridge to the Isle. Each bridge lasts 100 years or 200, and then the sea disposes of it. This was built in the 1890s, and that makes it the newest bridge, but that doesn't mean it's new. So it does take time to complete the repairs, so we're just going to hang around Brandkrug for a bit. Now, one thing I could do with the sweet bones, I could put me instead. So manual labor, heart, there's not much work on offer in Brandkrug, but I can find 6 pence worth of odd jobs. So that would get me another shilling to hire someone with. That's potentially an option, but let's see what happens after we get the bridge. Also remember here, we've got the tidal flats. The game does note that you can only unlock 1 room at a time. This would require 2 moon or 2 winter. So of course, if we looked at the worker again, we would see that they have moon, but they don't have 2, and so that would not be sufficient. In its current form, it would not be sufficient for the task. Cucurbit Bridge. Hush House has been many things over the centuries, including in the nocturnal period of 1896 to 1932, a jail. No one remembers that period fondly, but at least it meant Nocturnal Branch paid for a new bridge. So, we do have another pathway to unlock. So we've got the lodge at the gate, a cottage where Hush House's groundskeeper lived until the fire. If I can get into the place and make it habitable, I can use it as a base for reclaiming more of the house. Now this would require assistance, and in this case it would require 2 forge, heart, or knock. So we may be able to get the heart somewhere. You know, I actually know someone who would satisfy this, except that we don't have the ability to sort of bring them in. So. The local blacksmith can defeat the door, the rector probably has a spare key, and the midwife knows how to jiggle the latch on the back door. So this has already given us a hint, right, that we would be able to get Mrs. Kill to help us out with that. We have a few options available to us, but it's quite clear at this point we don't have what it takes to go further through the environment. So what we'll do is we'll go to the Sweet Bones. We'll use our health, so there's not much work on offer in Brandkrug, but I could find 6 pence worth of odd jobs, and we'll spend a minute to run by. Now, because we have so few elements of the soul, this is one of these cases where you have just this nice bit of reflection, and I'm kind of interested in... I don't know if this is a specific design choice, or if there is... if there's something else going on, but when you play Cultist Simulator, I definitely feel a tremendous urge to sort of have all of the verbs spinning at a given time. And in this case here, because we have different parts of ourselves, it's, you know, we're not just our verbs, but in this case we have elements of the soul that we are using to accomplish certain things. There are actually times where you want to just sit and wait for something to be done. It's a lot more relaxing, and you have this beautiful music alongside of it, and it's a game that I actually do find that I enjoy just sort of sitting and waiting around in a bit. I don't know how it will work as far as videos are concerned, but it's a really nice atmosphere, and it's one that I enjoy. It's one that I enjoy quite a bit. But it does mean that there's going to be things that are a little different. This is going to be one challenge with sort of the half-hour video format, is that every once in a while we'll have things that we want to accomplish, but we're sort of gated by what abilities we have available to us. So manual labor. As they used to say in my youth, the day is done and so am I, but I've earned my pay. So there's the sixpence. We can keep them separately, but if you ever want to combine, you can either hit the combine button here, or you can stick it here and it becomes a shilling. And again, if you ever, it's usually just easier to hit it here, but if you want, you can break up the coins. Now, technically, if I wanted, I'd be able to get the shilling, hire the miner, and use it to unlock Denzel's smithy, but I'm not really going to use Denzel today anyway. So in this case, I can leave it aside. In fact, I might be willing to use Denzel. Yeah, I think I may actually wind up using him. I need to remember what core has as its second aspect. So there's a few details we didn't really talk about. There are different periods over the course of the day, and there are different seasons. So in this case, spring, the world warms. We are currently at dusk, night from day, silver from gold, the Vesper hour, when the priests would honor the rising of the evening star, Meniscate, and it has now become night. Night has fallen, dawn will come soon, keep vigil. Coming up. So the reason I wanted to point this out is that some of you actually may know what a Book of Hours is. So there is the idea of certain hours for prayers and governing the day. So of course the title is just a really good one. It's the godlike entities of the secret histories are called hours, but a Book of Hours is something that you can in fact find. In fact, if you search on YouTube, you can find a number of old books of hours that are these really nice artifacts. But obviously the meaning changes when it's related to the secret histories. But yeah, so if you've ever heard of like Vespers or things like that, that's very much what a Book of Hours is related to. All right, dawn. At the time of the Sisters of the Abbey, at this time, the Sisters of the Abbey would raise their voices in praise of the Madrigad for the office of Aurora. Now, there's weather in this game, so sunny. The sun is not what it was, but today he is smiling. So in this case, it's two lantern. Life is a pure flame, and we live by an invisible sun within us. Thomas Brown. Lantern is the principle of the secret place, sometimes called the House of the Sun, and the light above it. It also has two sky aspect, winter, storm, echo, song, the intricacies of mathematics and the principles of flight. Law's touch is lighter than we sometimes think, matters of balance, harmony, and necessity. It's weather. Each kind of weather brings its own influence. I can make use of these as a memory. And of course it has the memory aspect. Something remembered might be something understood. Memories can be used to help with crafting and to upgrade skills. Memories disappear each dawn, except persistent ones. So let's come up with what we want to do during the day. So we've got our health, that's heart, nectar, scale. Core gives us heart and grail, so I can actually do something that I was planning on. So in this case here, let's start with Mrs. Kill. So it did say that the midwife can sort of jimmy the back door. So let's start with our core here. So we'll speak with Mrs. Kill. Mrs. Kill's mood always improves when I drop by. Mrs. Kill stands ready to help. You always cheer me up, she says morosely. And there she is. As somber as autumn, as kind as autumn, she also likes her beer. Make use of the midwife's help before dawn. So it's also worth remembering we have different ways of getting introductions. So in this case, Mrs. Kill has 2 grail, 1 heart. She has assistance and can give an introduction. Noting that Denzel will accept heart. Of course, you've already got a hint here or someone who can appeal to a secret passion for saffron cake. Likewise with Reverend Timothy, perhaps someone who shares his interest in theology or poetry. I'll leave it to you to think about this, but was there a character that was mentioned as trying poetry that we might be able to work with? A cottage where Hush House's groundskeeper lived until the fire. If I can get into the place and make it habitable, I can use it as a base for reclaiming more of the house. Oh, you know what? I think it would have been good for me to try and use Denzel after all. Too late now. So I also have the option of considering the Silken Book. So this is uncatalogued, and it's a good idea to catalog it if I if I can. So consider, examine, appreciate, catalog. The soul's labors. Some books are to be tasted, others to be swallowed, and some few to be chewed and digested. Bacon. Studying requires effort. You will always need a suitable soul card first. So in this case, we can use a soul card. However, we can't use something with nectar, scale, fatigued, or a malady. So in this case, we can't use our health to catalog the book. We need to use core, Arab, or one of the other elements of the soul that we don't have. So my journal, the silken binding is familiar, but the storm so scattered my thoughts. So this means I'm not going to be able to deal with the mystery grail, and that's because I just don't have the grail now with my core and health being used. But that's fine. We've got other things that we can do. All right, the Keeper's Lodge. For 500 years, in the times we call baronial, curia, nocturnal, there was always a keeper to watch the ways, weed the gardens, mend the roof when the sun was shining. There is no keeper now, but the lodge's roof still weathers the storms of Brandkrug Bay. So, my journal, I'm sure of it. The storms scattered my thoughts, but each page I turn is familiar. I begin to recall now why I came here. For art. Better yet, for art. A really, really big art. More about your origin and your aspirations in your journal. So we've got another Arab to work with. I forgot about that. Okay, so we've got a few things that we want to do. So, the Bee Silk Journal. Picasso? I'll give you Picasso. The artist came to Hush House to shape a share of history of primal, ultimate, unprecedented experience. But you can complete the game by recording any history. You might wish to begin your studies with the Bosque Wisdom. So, Memories the artist, Dada was a start. The Surrealist Manifesto, a step along the road, but only a step. The road goes nowhere unless it goes into the wood, and that's a dark road we can only walk... and that's a road we can only walk in the dark. Wait, no, not in the dark. In blood. Hip deep in blood. Oh, shut up. Give it to me. I'll write it. Okay, so... what I wanted to do was to tackle this mystery grail. So when you get a text, you still, in the case of, much like Cultist Simulator, you will still want to read texts and gain the knowledge that's inside of them, although it definitely works differently. And more importantly, in Book of Hours, you get to keep the book, so you can read them and reread them. But in this case here, we need to... Oh! I definitely haven't mastered this. Alright, yeah. So, we can employ our Arab here. Grail, birth. I can master this mystery. Enough Grail to match mystery Grail. So, we've got a few things inside of this room. So we've got dandelion wine, homemade flower wine. We've got a basket of clean laundry, a morning luxury. We've got the potted dragon tree, determined spiky little survivor. Fractured mirror, cracked and fly specked, a straw cushion chair upholstered without any particular skill. Notice that these all have different aspects. I didn't talk about knock before, so the principle called knock permits no seal and no isolation. It thrusts us gleefully out of the safety of ignorance. Knock opens doors and unseams barriers. We've got a number of books here, so I'll move that later. We've got Pillis oat bread, gritty bread made with the hardy ancient oats that grow at land's end. So this has forge. Fire, I once read, is the winter that warms and the spring that consumes. The principle of the forge transforms and destroys. Nectar, heart and nectar, we know those. Rose was one that we haven't encountered yet. The rose which encompasseth all, 9 directions to new horizons. Exploration, enlightenment, hope. So again, this is one of these cases, much like nectar and scale and sky and moon, where it doesn't specifically say that it's a principle, but it behaves very much like one. It's a thing, and it is sustenance. The bad live that they may eat and drink. The good eat and drink that they may live. Got the shaving mirror, snip snip, that's got the moth aspect. I knew a man who captured moths in a bell jar. On nights like this he would release them one by one to die in the candle. Moth is the wild and perilous principle of chaos and yearning. tea. One thing I love about this game. So one thing that is, I think, pretty clear at this point, but you know, it's worth saying. One thing I like about the atmosphere of the game, like the idea of the music and the exploration and that, and I talked a bit about how this game does a good job of engaging the senses. There's just something, if you're thinking of sort of a kind of cozy library game, the idea of being able to make like a hot beverage on a cold day and drink it as a character is a neat one. And it's kind of funny. I think this gives an indication in terms of why people feel so strongly about these kinds of games. That I can't really think of a game where I'm like, hey, I get to make a cup of tea. Obviously, if you're playing Baldur's Gate or Divinity or something, you can make food, you can get a buff. If you're playing World of Warcraft, you can make food and get a buff. And certainly you can use food for buffs in this game as well. Yeah, there's just, a big house full of things, and some of those things are food and some of those things are books. It just kind of continues to reinforce some of the things that I find interesting. But there is a practical side to this as well. So one, there's the guest bed, the lodge, stout, rustic, snug. Use a matching soul card to move your belongings in and make this your bed, or place a matching visitor card to encourage them to stay a little longer. So in this case, we will camp. I'll make this my lodgings for the time being. Move your belongings into this room. You can then use this bed to rest soul cards and recover maladies. On top of that, we have another area that we would want to get into. We actually want to get into Hush House, the great gate of the house. The walls of the house tower above me. I had been told that it was abandoned after a fire, but there is no sign of any such thing. The building will no doubt need restoration, but it's in better shape than I'd feared. Books are the memory that does not die, reads the inscription above the gate, and for that we need a key. Most rooms in the house will need renovation. This just needs to be opened, and it requires 3 knock and a thing, and apparently the requirement is 2 knock, but if we already satisfy this, then... So, this is probably one of the easiest rooms to unlock in the game, but you do need to actually know how to explore. If you think of how to sort of tell people how to play this game, if you think about it, you do actually need to understand how to interact with rooms and find your way around before you're able to make it to Hush House. All right, so we're continuing to read our journal. That'll probably take us through the night. But we can also take a look at the books that we've got. So we have Traveling at Night, Volume 1, The Annotated Dream Journals of Christopher Lopoli, sometimes called The Only Readable Occultist, Literate, Entertaining, Bewildering. We also have Volume 2. And we have 3 books here. So we've got an uncatalogued book from the Baronial period, an uncatalogued book from the Nocturnal period, and an uncatalogued book from the Curia period. And in those particular cases, we'll learn a little bit more about these periods. One thing we can see here is that the gatehouse of the Watchman's Tower comes from the Baronial period, but a lot of this has to do with the history of the house. And in the remaining minutes that I have, I'd much rather talk about my history. So, Grail Birth, I've mastered this and gathered the lessons it concealed. So, we've already got the Bee Silk Journal, but we have some lessons, desires and dissolutions. I've gained more understanding of desires and dissolutions. Use this card with consider or at a desk. So in the case of this game, you've got, you don't just gain languages, but you can gain specific skills. And one of the ways that you will gain a skill, as it says, you use it with consider. We don't have a desk yet. We can put in this consider verb here. A new skill, the boundaries between flesh, pearl, and pleasure are equally contingent. This is a safe place for me now, to the extent that dreams are safe. So So if I want to rest, I can now put a soul. Well, there's a few things that I can do in here. So I can put in a soul, a skill, a memory. I can use it to restore elements of the soul, and for that I would need a drink. Another leaf on the Tree of Wisdoms. So, desires and dissolutions, I wanted to point this out here so I can, whenever it asks for a skill, I'm now able to, oh well, sorry, I normally could put this in. But you do actually need to match certain aspects, and desires and dissolutions takes Grail, Grail and Moon. Now it is Bosk, so the game did recommend that we may want to start our journey with Bosk. It also counts as Horomachistry. Now what are these? Well, that's going to be the subject of a future video. But in this case here, you notice that when we were studying our book, we needed, it was a mystery grail. Now we had enough with both our Arab and our core. Either one of those would have allowed us to read the book, but there are more challenging books, and so we may want to employ some of our skills, in this case, desires and dissolutions, towards a better understanding of a given text. Or when we start doing some of the crafting or the other works that we want to do, we may find it useful for desires and dissolutions. Finally, you'll notice that we've got additional lessons. So if we take the consider verb, we can add one of these for understanding, and if we have a memory that matches this, a memory with Grail or Moon, and an associated element of the soul, we can actually level this skill up, and we can increase the aspect so we can get even more powerful Grail and Moon, which is exactly how I plan on using that. So in the next video, we have a couple of things that we want to do. So number one, I want to explore the rest of the house and see what our next few rooms are going to be in terms of exploration. I would like to catalog these books, and I'd like to see if I can read them. Right now I don't have the ability to do anything with Nock and Sky, so these are beyond me, but that doesn't always have to be that way. One thing that would have been interesting is if I had for Sky, I would have been able to employ the sunny day towards reading it. And then there was this talk of committing things to Bosk, and so that involves the Tree of Wisdoms, which is definitely a nice attention-getting moment, which I want to save for a future episode. So in addition to beginning the work proper on starting to renovate the house, we have some books that we want to work on, and then we also have some self-improvement that I'm sort of interested in following through on. But all of that is going to be in a future video. So thank you everybody for watching. I should maybe mention there's a couple of events that will be coming up, and again, this is not going to age particularly well, but depending on when this video goes online, it may be helpful for some people. I will be doing a live stream of Book of Hours on the Steam page for the release of the game. The release of the game has been announced on the Weather Factory blog, so they said I think it's 6 o'clock BST. I don't remember the exact, I know the time for me, but I don't know the time there. In any case, Weather Factory is always the company that you want to get the official announcements for. But in addition, I will be interviewing Weather Factory on the GOG channel. So if you prefer to buy your games on GOG, this game is going to be available on GOG. But in this case here, I know somebody who sort of organizes that work, and in this case, I've been given the opportunity to interview the creators of this game for. I'm not quite sure we've worked out an exact time, but they have lives, so I don't think it's going to be all day like I normally do. But that will be at 7 p.m. BST or 11 a.m. PDT, 1 o'clock my time. But in this particular case here, I will be talking with both Alexis and Lottie for Book of Hours, and then the remaining time I will be playing the game. So on the 17th of August, that'll be on Steam, and then on the 18th of August, if you want to hear the creators talk about the game with me, that will be there. And I hope to have recordings of both. So if you if you miss those, I will do my best to make sure that that's made available to people. In any case, a little bit longer than I was planning on going. I'll see you in the next episode. Take care.